Welcome to Serendipity Wines Icon Series. We're proud to share interviews of some of the most influential personalities in the wine business. We will showcase the people who have made history or are making historic strides into our future reverence. It's our aim at Serendipity Wines to give you a glimpse behind the scenes. Cheers. So would you please welcome Nicole Carter and Heidi von der Mehden.
Thank you, everybody, for spending some time with us this afternoon. As Daniel said, my name is Nicole Carter. I have the great fortune of being the president of Merry Edwards Winery, and I'm joined by Heidi von der Mehden, who is our winemaker. I'm going to spend about 5 minutes just giving you, sort of the general history and the lay of the land of Merry Edwards. And then everybody's always anxious to get to the winemaker, not to the executive. So I'll turn it over to Heidi and let her take you through the wines. As Daniel said, a pretty iconic winery and a pretty special place to be in the Russian River. So our winery, if you're not familiar with Merry Edwards, is located in the town of Sebastopol. We're about, as the crow flies, maybe 7 miles from the Pacific Ocean. So we benefit greatly from maritime influence, not only at the winery, but throughout all of our vineyards. We own and farm about 80 acres in the Russian River. So we are dedicated to the Russian River. Everything we do is Russian River with the exception of one wine. And we're going to taste that wine today, which is Sonoma Coast. And really, our story begins with Mary herself. If you're not familiar with Merry Edwards, the person, somebody who has really paved quite a path for women in the wine industry. She was among some of the first women to graduate from Davis in the winemaking program and made her career beginnings in the 70s at Mount Eden Winery, which is where it really started for her, and her interest in Pinot Noir and her interest in clonal material all started at Mount Eden. From there, she sort of made her way up the coast and landed in Sonoma County, and is known for starting programs such as Matanzas Creek and Laurier and a lot of other wineries that have gone on to great fame in the Sonoma County area. She became really interested in the Russian River and wanted to dedicate her career to Pinot Noir and some of the great vineyards and terroirs of the Russian River. So today, the Merry Edwards Winery is focused on single vineyard designation of Pinot Noir. And then we have this fan favorite Sauvignon Blanc, which I'll let Heidi tell you the story about. We have 8 single vineyard Pinot Noirs that come from the winery, and then 2 appellation wines, a Russian River and a Sonoma Coast, which are the wines we're going to taste today. And we make about 25,000 cases in total, more than half of which is Pinot Noir, and then the remainder is Sauvignon Blanc. The clone story for Mary. Mary got really interested in clonal material at Mount Eden, as I said earlier, and took some Pinot Noir to Davis to be heat treated and cleaned up. And what came of that was a clone called UCD 37. And that happened in the very early 80s. And it began to gain some popularity with growers in the Russian River and Sonoma County area. But Mary never had a chance to plant it, which is the interesting part of the story. And when she saved up enough money to buy her first vineyard, which wasn't until 1997, which is the Meredith Vineyard and our flagship estate, was the first time she had the opportunity to plant the clone. So she contacted the nursery to buy some, and they said, "I'm sorry, we're sold out of UCD 37. And she said, "Well, I'm Merry Edwards." And they said, "Hold, please." And they came back to her and said, we found some material for you. And she was able to plant just a handful of rows. Today, fast forward, many of our Pinot Noir vineyards are planted to UCD 37. We find that it does particularly well, not only in the Russian River, but for our style of Pinot Noir, which is a bigger, richer, more robust Pinot Noir, as we'll taste today. And many of our neighbor growers and even some of the growers we purchase from now use that material. So Heidi and I are super fortunate to be there. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Heidi, and then she's going to get to the wines. Heidi was hired by Merry in 2015 from Arrowwood Vineyards, and Merry was very interested in thinking about how she was going to succession plan for herself, and bringing someone on board who actually didn't have Pinot Noir experience. So Heidi was trained as a Cabernet winemaker, spent most of her career making Cabernet, and Mary thought that was absolutely ideal. And so that she could shape and mold her to make her style of Pinot Noir. So we consider Heidi to have apprenticed with Mary for quite a few years. And in 2018 is the first vintage where Mary stepped back and let Heidi run the show. So the wines that you have in your glass are what we consider to be Heidi's first vintage as chief winemaker. And we think that the legacy has continued with great consistency. Then in 2018, late 2018, Mary started to think about her own retirement and started to seek out someone to acquire her business because she didn't have an heir that wanted to take on the business. She is a champagne freak at heart. She has always made sparkling wine, if you didn't know that on the side. And when the idea came that she could sell the business to Champagne Louis Roederer, it was a match made in heaven for her. So in 2019, February, Maison Louis Roederer acquired the property, acquired the brand, brought me on, and Heidi agreed to stay. And Mary has since retired. So our connection with her is a little bit more than in spirit. We manage and farm her home ranch where she lives, and that's also part of our stable of vineyards. So we're still strongly connected to her. So with that, you've got a Sauvignon Blanc in your glass. I'm going to turn it over to Heidi. She's going to take us through the wines, and hopefully we'll have some questions from you at the end.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you everybody for joining us on this. So yes, bring out your Sauvignon Blanc. This is the famous somewhat naked lady label that everybody loves, the dancing ladies. It's interesting to have the Sauvignon Blanc in our lineup. Originally, Mary did not want to make Sauvignon Blanc. She didn't want to make white wines. It was going to be 100% Pinot Noir at our winery, passion for Pinot. But then she realized that when she was traveling and doing winemaker dinners, it was nice to have a white wine to offer customers, and it was just something missing. And her sister always loved the Sauvignon Blanc that Mary had made when she was at Matanzas Creek back in the 80s. And so her sister suggested she revitalize that winemaking style. Our Sauvignon Blanc is quite distinct. And it's that way because Mary did not like Sauvignon Blanc. So when she first was making a Sauvignon Blanc, she wanted to find a way to make it a wine that she enjoyed. So we barrel ferment our Sauvignon Blanc 100%. We stir the lees for 5 months, twice a week. We do farming out in the vineyard that promotes a more tropical fruit driven and rich, lush style. So all of that comes together to make a very lush, rich, and still inviting and crisp and yummy Sauvignon Blanc. The 2018 vintage is really special to us because we've been trying to go 100% estate fruit for many years. But that takes a lot of time and money to buy vineyards and plant them and develop them. So in 2015, Mary started to develop some Sauvignon Blanc vineyards for the first time for ourselves in the Russian River Valley. And the 2018 vintage is the first vintage where the majority of the fruit that went into this is actually from our own planted vineyards. We planted them to 1/3 Sauvignon Muscat clone, which is a very aromatic clone. It's the clone that the name evokes what you would think, the muscat aromatics. And 2/3 to the Shenandoah clone, which is your traditional Sauvignon Blanc clone. We found that that's a really good mix for our style. You get those beautiful aromatics, but also the nice grapefruit and citrus tones from the Shenandoah to marry together. Okay, so the 2018 Russian River should be the first one you taste and pour. Again, it's the 2018 vintage, same vintage as our Sauvignon Blanc. The 2018 was an interesting year. It was a very large vintage for everybody in Sonoma and Napa County, a lot of fruit. And I learned from Mary, though, that you have to make your wine in the vineyard. So we went out there, we saw how much fruit was out there, and we said, well, we just got to stick to our guns. We have to thin it back to our regular protocol. We took off shoulders, we took off clusters off of short shoots, we thinned back the vintage. So we had still our about 3 tons to the acre tonnage in our vineyards. And by doing that, even with a larger vintage, we ended up with this really intense, beautiful Pinot Noir. So it's really, if you stick to your guns, do your farming right, you're going to end up kind of evening out those vintages, and you get slight vintage variations, but you still end up with a beautiful wine every year. The 2018 is a really lush, yummy Pinot. It has the classic cherry fruit of the Russian River Valley and big, lush, inviting tannins. And then our last Pinot Noir, I want to make sure I get this one in, is the 2017 Meredith. So this is not 100% UCD 37 Mary's clone, but it is a lot of Mary's clone because we've planted more of UCD 37 at our Meredith Estate Vineyard since Mary was first able to get those handful of rows. We grafted over a few vineyard rows. That always ends up being one of our best blocks within the vineyard. And then we also planted a couple extra blocks of the UCD 37. So we have plenty of that clone and also some 667 planted there that usually gets blended in with the UCD 37 to get really nice dark fruit, intense flavors. But then the UCD 37 gives it the structure and that deep, rich, dark color that we're always looking for in our Pinot. Mary was very concerned about color with our Pinot Noirs because she always said, well, the first thing you do is you look at what's in the glass. And if it doesn't look inviting, you're going to already think, is it really going to be that great of a wine? So we've always been focused on colors. And with the UCD 37, we have really tiny berries, which give a good skin to pulp ratio for dark, intense color. And 667 is similar. The Meredith Estate is in the southwestern portion of the Russian River Valley, and it's very close to the ocean. It has really nice, cool breezes. The breeze I'm having right here today is because of crazy windstorms. It's usually not this windy out here, but we usually have very nice, cool breezes to really monitor and measure the temperature in the Russian River Valley, especially at Meredith. And you end up having really intense, ripe flavors, but also holding on to the acidity naturally. So you get a nice balance and a really nice ageable wine. We have vineyards throughout the entire Russian River Valley. We're able to make wines from different areas, which give different flavors throughout the Russian River Valley. So it really is fun and exciting to present these and work with all these vineyards.